You thought the betrayal would break you. It made you into something worse. Carl Jung understood the exact mechanism behind it. They did not break the empath. They forged one, and what they made cannot be controlled. You wake one morning and the months of ache are simply gone. You look at the one who drained you and feel nothing. Something did not survive that betrayal. Something colder walked out in its place. By the end, you will know what died, what was born, and why they now fear you. Most people assume that when an empath is betrayed, they retreat into permanent fragility. Jung understood the opposite. He understood the precise psychological process that runs when a person who overgives is pushed past the point of return. You will understand what died inside you, why it was never your true self in the first place, and why the version of you that emerged feels like a stranger living behind your own eyes. But the part Jung would have you sit with is harder than the betrayal itself. The thing they accidentally created is a part of you that you were taught to bury before you could even speak. And there is a very specific danger hidden inside this cold clarity, a trap that can quietly turn your new sovereignty into a permanent prison. Because here is the truth this whole story is moving toward. You are not more dangerous because you became cruel. You are more dangerous because you can no longer be used. But what happens next is the mechanism they never anticipated. Let us go back to the moment it happened. The moment of the betrayal felt like a kind of psychological murder. Something in you was being killed, and you could feel it happening in real time. Your sense of who you were started to come apart at the seams. You felt your identity disintegrating, the way a photograph dissolves when it is left out in the rain. And yet, when the worst of the dust settled, you noticed something that did not make sense. You were still standing. The you that was supposed to have died was somehow still here, watching the wreckage with a clarity that frightened you. This is where Jung gives us the first piece of the map. He spent a great deal of his life studying what he called the persona. The persona is the mask we construct to meet the world. It is the version of ourselves we present at the door of every room. The face that says, "Here is who you can expect me to be. Here is how I will behave. Here is what you can count on." We all wear one. There is nothing shameful in it. The persona is the handshake between the private self and the public world. In his 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung described it plainly. Through the persona, a man tries to appear as this or that, or he hides behind a mask, or he may even build up a definite persona as a barricade. A barricade. Hold on to that word. For you, the mask had a very particular shape. You were the understanding one, the fixer, the person who could be relied upon to absorb the tension in any room before it had a chance to detonate. You were the one who held the emotional weather for everyone around you, who gave the benefit of the doubt long past the point any reasonable person would have, who translated other people's cruelty into a story about their pain so that you could keep loving them. And here is what made it so hard to see. The costume worked. It was rewarded constantly. People praised you for your patience. They called you wise, selfless, the strong one, the safe one. Every time you swallowed your own need to tend to someone else's, the world told you that this was love, that this was who you were meant to be. So you doubled down. You polished the mask until it shone, never noticing that the more praise it earned, the heavier it became to wear, and the harder it became to take off. That was the costume, and here is the part that is difficult to hear. The danger of the persona, Jung warned, is not that we wear one. The danger is that we forget we are wearing it. We become identical with the mask. We mistake the costume for the skin. So when the betrayal came, it did not murder you. It burned the costume off your body. And because you had worn that costume for so long, because you had become identical with it, the burning felt exactly like dying. You could not tell the difference between losing the mask and losing yourself, because you had forgotten there was ever a difference to lose. Think of a woman in her 50s. For 3 decades, she was the hinge that every door in her family swung on. She smoothed over the arguments at dinner before they could become wars. She absorbed her mother's anxiety, her partner's moods, her children's disappointments, and she metabolized all of it quietly so that no one else had to. If you had asked her who she was, she would have told you she was a deeply caring person. She believed that the caring was the core of her. When her marriage finally collapsed under the weight of a betrayal she had been excusing for years, she expected to lose herself entirely. And for a while it felt that way. But months later, sitting alone in a quiet kitchen, she realized something that unsettled her more than the grief. She had not lost herself. She had lost the job. The exhausting around-the-clock, unpaid job of being everyone's mirror. The caring was still there. What was gone was the compulsion to perform it for people who never once asked how she was doing. When this psychological structure shatters, you are forced to ask a terrifying question about who you actually are underneath the role you were assigned. And the search for that answer does not lead where you expect. It does not lead back to the person who hurt you. Because this was never really about them. You look at the person who betrayed you, and slowly a colder realization arrives. They are not the author of your suffering. They are a symptom of it. Because somewhere underneath the shock, you recognize the choreography. You have danced this exact dance before. You have run this precise script in other rooms, with other people, going back further than you want to look. This is where the work stops being about the betrayer and starts being about the door they walk through. Jung understood that we do not arrive in adulthood as blank slates. We carry inside us what he called the imago, the deep internalized image of our earliest caregivers, formed long before we had language to question it. The child adapts to the parent it is given. If that parent was unstable or unavailable or frightening or lost in their own storms, the child learns a survival strategy. And the strategy is breathtakingly intelligent for a small person with no power. The child learns to read the parent, to track every shift in tone, every tightening of the jaw, every change in the air pressure of a room, and to adjust itself instantly to keep the peace and stay safe. That is the origin of what you came to call your empathy. Here is the uncomfortable truth, and I want to say it carefully, because it is the hinge of this entire video. Your extraordinary capacity to attune to other people may not have begun as a gift. For many people in your position, it began as a wound dressed up as a virtue. You learned to feel other people's feelings before your own because feeling your own was not safe. You became fluent in everyone else's interior weather because as a child your survival depended on forecasting it. So when an adult came along who needed managing, who ran hot and cold, who left you guessing and over-functioning to keep the connection alive, you did not fall for a stranger. You came home. The dynamic was not new to you. It was the most familiar room in your psyche. You walked into it with your eyes closed because you had memorized the floor plan at the age of 7. And this is why the relationship could feel so much like love even while it was draining you. The nervous system does not distinguish between what is familiar and what is good. It only knows what it recognizes. The anxious vigilance, the walking on eggshells, the surge of relief when you finally got it right and the storm passed, all of it produced the exact emotional climate you grew up inside. Your body read that familiarity as home, and home, to a child, is another word for safety. You were not chasing happiness with these people. You were chasing the resolution of an old, unfinished feeling. You were trying to win a game that was rigged before you were old enough to know you were playing it. This is the part that is hard to forgive yourself for. So let me reframe it. The people who exploited you did not pick a lock. They did not break in. They walked through a door that had been propped open in childhood and left open ever since, because closing it had never felt like an option. You were not naive. You were loyal to a pattern that once kept you alive. The woman in the quiet kitchen follows this thread back through the decades. She remembers being 8 years old, reading her father's footsteps in the hallway to know which version of him was coming home. She remembers how good she became at it, how proud she was of her radar. And she understands, with a strange calm, that she never stopped scanning. She had only changed who she was scanning for. However, The person who betrayed you did not invent this dynamic. They merely stepped into a perfectly tailored void, a space that had been waiting, shaped, and ready since before they ever arrived. And tracing this pattern back to its origin forces you to confront the darkest aspect of your own empathy. Because if your endless giving was a survival strategy, then there was something it was protecting you from. There was something you were never allowed to do. Therefore, when the mask gives way, something else is forced to walk out of the grave, something you buried a very long time ago. Once the mask is gone, you begin to notice something new in yourself, and it is not grief, it is capacity. You discover that you are suddenly able to let people be disappointed in you and not move to fix it. You no longer rush to fill the silence when someone is upset with you. When a request lands that you do not want to grant, the word no arrives in your mouth before the old guilt can intercept it. And the people who relied on your compliance notice immediately. They tell you that you have changed. They tell you that you have become cold or selfish or hard. Some of them are genuinely confused. Some of them are alarmed in a way that, if you look closely, reveals exactly how much they were taking. To understand what is happening, we have to turn to the idea Jung is most known for, the shadow. The shadow in Jung's psychology is everything about ourselves that we have disowned. It is the sum of the traits and impulses we push down into the dark because the people around us, or the world we grew up in, made them unacceptable. Jung described it bluntly as the inferior part of the personality, the storehouse of everything we have refused to look at, including, in his words, the intentional repressions of painful thoughts and feelings. Now here is the move that most people miss, and it is the entire secret of your transformation. The contents of your shadow are determined by what you were forced to repress. And you, the empath, were not forced to repress cruelty. You were forced to repress refusal. Think about that. A child who learns to survive by absolute compliance has to take the opposite of compliance and bury it alive. The anger, the self-interest, the capacity to say, "This does not work for me," the right to take up space and to disappoint people and to want things for yourself at someone else's inconvenience. All of it had to go into the dark, because as a child, expressing any of it felt life-threatening. So your shadow did not fill up with monsters. It filled up with the one word you were never allowed to say: no. So when the betrayal burned away the mask of the understanding one, it did more than remove a costume. It unsealed the vault. And what walked out was not evil. It was the disowned half of you, claiming the place it had been denied. The part that can refuse. The part that can be angry without apologizing for the anger. The part that can look at someone's pain and decide, with full compassion and full clarity, that it is not yours to carry. It is worth pausing on why the people around you react with such alarm. When someone has organized their relationship with you around your inability to say no, your no is not experienced by them as a boundary. It is experienced as a betrayal. They are not lying when they say you have changed. From inside their world, the reliable resource has malfunctioned. The vending machine has started refusing coins, and so they reach for the oldest lever they have, the one that worked on you for decades. They tell you that you have become selfish. They appeal to the guilt that used to run you like a current. The difference now is that the wire has been cut. The accusation arrives and it has nowhere to land. This is the precise moment you become unreadable to the people who used to control you. For your entire life, you were predictable to them. They could forecast your behavior because you always chose their comfort over your truth. Now the forecast fails. You have integrated the exact weapon they once used to keep you in line, the capacity for refusal, and you are no longer afraid to hold it. The something worse they accidentally created is simply you, in full possession of your own teeth. The woman in the kitchen says no to a family member who has always relied on her yes. She waits for the familiar flood of guilt to arrive and punish her. It does not come. There is only a clean, level quiet, and she sits in it, almost not trusting how steady it feels. If you just recognize that quiet, if you have said no and felt the old guilt fail to arrive for the first time in your life, do not let the moment pass you by. Make it a commitment instead of a feeling. Write this in the comments, not as agreement, but as a line you are holding yourself to from now on. I took back the word they buried in me. Say it where you will see it again, because the part of you that can refuse arrives carrying something you were not warned about. But the shadow you have taken back comes with a severe and immediate cost. Reclaiming your refusal does not arrive gift-wrapped. It arrives with an edge, and that edge can cut in a direction you do not intend. And this is the part you were not supposed to survive into, because the power you have just discovered contains, hidden inside it, the seed of a brand new prison. The new detachment feels like power. After a lifetime of bleeding for everyone who asked, the sudden ability to feel nothing is intoxicating. You find yourself tempted to make it permanent, to burn every bridge, to trust no one, to decide once and for all that warmth is a liability, and that the only safe person is the untouchable one. You start to wear cynicism the way you used to wear kindness, as a full identity. Jung had a name for this, and it is the most important word in this entire video: enantiodromia. It comes from the old Greek philosopher Heraclitus, and it describes the tendency of any extreme to eventually turn into its own opposite. When a person holds a one-sided attitude for too long, the psyche compensates by violently swinging to the contrary position. The martyr who gave everything becomes the fortress that gives nothing. And the danger, the genuine danger, is that this feels like growth. It feels like you have learned your lesson, but you have not crossed over into freedom. You have only swung to the far end of the same chain. Jung gave us the way out, and it is precise. Listen closely. The only person who escapes the grim law of enantiodromia is the man who knows how to separate himself from the unconscious, not by repressing it, for then it simply attacks him from the rear, but by putting it clearly before him as that which he is not. Read that again in your mind, not by repressing it. The trap is to take your old softness, your old capacity to feel, and to bury it the way you once buried your refusal, to go cold and call it healing. But Jung warns that whatever you repress does not disappear. It attacks you from the rear. The warmth you exile does not die. It festers, and it leaks out as bitterness, as suspicion, as a corrosive contempt for anyone who still dares to be open. This is what makes the trap so convincing. Cynicism does an extraordinary impression of wisdom. It uses the same vocabulary. It talks about being realistic, about having learned, about no longer being naive. It feels like clarity because it is so much sharper than the fog you used to live in. But there is a way to tell the difference between real discernment and the counterfeit. Discernment looks at a specific person and reads a specific truth. Cynicism has already decided about everyone before they walk in the room. One is a response to reality. The other is a wall built to keep reality out. When you find yourself certain in advance that everyone wants something, you are not seeing clearly. You are hiding inside a conclusion. The escape is not repression. The escape is consciousness. You have to put the coldness clearly in front of you and see it for what it is, that which you are not. The detachment is a phase you are passing through. It is not your new name. The woman in the kitchen has come a long way from the person who absorbed everyone's weather. But one afternoon, a friend offers her a small, genuine kindness, an unprompted gesture with nothing asked in return. And she watches herself receive it with a flicker of sneering suspicion. Her mind moves immediately to the angle, the hidden cost, the manipulation that must be buried somewhere underneath. For a moment, she feels clever and safe. And then a quieter part of her goes still, because she recognizes the feeling. She has stopped being a victim. She is becoming a fortress. And a fortress, for all its walls, is still a place you cannot leave. Here is the truth that cuts through the seduction of the cold. If you stay frozen in this detachment, the people who broke you still control your shape. You are still being defined by them, only in reverse. The martyr was bent toward them. The fortress is bent away from them. Either way, they are the center of gravity. Either way, your form is dictated by the wound. Because substituting the mask of the victim for the mask of the fortress is not healing. It is an inflation. The ego, newly armed, mistakes its armor for wholeness. It says, "Look how strong I have become," while quietly it has only traded one rigidity for another. If you do not recognize this mechanism, your new sovereignty will slowly calcify into a permanent prison. And the worst part is that you will have built it yourself, brick by brick, and called it protection. Jung knew that escaping this pendulum requires an entirely different psychological operation, not a swing, a synthesis. So you step off the pendulum, you stop swinging between the martyr and the fortress, and you do something that neither of them could do. You stand still in the middle and hold both ends at once. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, and it sits at the heart of the work he named individuation, the lifelong process of becoming a whole and undivided self. The transcendent function is what emerges when you stop forcing the opposites inside you to fight for the throne, the soft and the severe, the open and the guarded, the one who feels and the one who refuses, and instead allow them to combine into something neither could be alone. He described it in almost alchemical language. The result is ascension in the flame, transmutation in the alchemical heat, the genesis of the subtle spirit. That is the transcendent function born of the union of opposites. The subtle spirit, the third thing, not the person who feels everything and protects nothing, not the person who protects everything and feels nothing. A new figure entirely, who feels deeply and protects fiercely at the same time, and discovers that these were never enemies. This is what it means to become the sovereign empath. You do not amputate your sensitivity. The cold detachment was never the destination. It was the anesthetic you needed to get through the surgery. True sovereignty does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop bleeding for people who only came to drink. And this synthesis is not a single event. It is not a door you walk through once and then live behind forever. It is a practice you return to, day after day, in small and unglamorous moments. It is the pause before you say yes. The half second in which you ask yourself whether this is care or whether this is the old reflex wearing care's clothing. It is noticing the pull to rescue and choosing this time to witness instead. It is letting someone you love sit in a discomfort you could relieve, because relieving it would rob them of something they need to carry themselves. Every time you make that choice consciously, you reinforce the third position. You are not white-knuckling a boundary. You are slowly becoming a person for whom the boundary is natural, the way breathing is natural, no longer a battle but a baseline. Picture the woman from the kitchen, a year on. She meets someone new, and within minutes her old radar lights up exactly as it always did. She reads the wound in this person instantly, the unhealed thing, the pattern that will eventually want managing. The difference is everything. The old version of her would have rushed in to heal it, to prove her worth by carrying it. The fortress version would have turned and walked out, contemptuous, certain that everyone is a threat. She does neither. She simply observes. She notes what she sees with compassion and without panic. She holds her boundary without making it a wall, and she stays present, available for connection, while remaining entirely unavailable for exploitation. She does not abandon herself to be close to someone. That finally is the skill she never had. Now we can return to where this all began, the wound itself, and see it with new eyes. Jung, writing in his memoirs about the ancient idea of the cure of souls, left us a line that holds the whole journey. And just as the wounder wounds himself, so the healer heals himself. The one who wounds is bound to their own wounding, and the one who heals can only do it by descending into the injury and surviving it. There is no shortcut around the dark. You had to go down into it. You had to lose the mask, meet the buried refusal, survive the cold, and climb back out carrying both halves of yourself. That descent was not a punishment that happened to you. Looking back, it reads more like an initiation, the kind every old story sends its hero through, the journey down into the underworld from which no one returns unchanged. And notice what the line refuses to let you keep. It does not say the wound was good. It does not ask you to be grateful to the person who caused it, or to call the betrayal a blessing in disguise. That would be a lie, and a part of you that has stopped lying would never believe it. What it says is quieter and harder. The wound was real, and you went through it. And the going through is what made you a healer of your own life rather than its perpetual patient. You do not have to thank the people who hurt you. You only have to recognize that you did not stay where they left you. They aimed the blow at the soft place. They could not have known that under the softness was something they had no power to touch, because it had been waiting there, sealed and intact, since before you ever learned to give yourself away. When you reach this third position, the entire landscape of your relationships irreversibly alters. The people who could only relate to you as a resource fall away, because there is nothing left for them to extract. And the people capable of meeting you as an equal can finally find you, because for the first time, you are actually there, behind your own eyes, with the gate in your own hands. This is the moment your empathy ceases to be a liability and becomes an instrument of truth that no one can turn against you. You still see straight into people. You always could. The difference is that seeing no longer obligates you to save. Your sensitivity has become a way of knowing, not a way of being consumed. So let me say plainly the thing this whole story has been moving toward. You are not more dangerous because you became cruel. You are more dangerous because you can no longer be used. That is the entire reversal. The breaking did not make you hard. It made you whole. And a whole person cannot be run by someone else's hand. They tried to break the empath. What they actually did was force you into possession of yourself. The softness remained. The gate came back. And the part of you that you were taught to bury before you could speak finally stood up. Not as a weapon against the world, but as the lock on your own door. You reclaim the gate, you stop abandoning yourself. You are no longer available to be broken. So before you go, do not just feel that and scroll. Make it yours. Say it in the comments as a promise to the person you have become. A line you can return to the next time someone tries to pull you back into the old shape. I am no longer available to be broken.
In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.